Athens City Council. It's Monday, May 9th, 7 p.m., and we are having a series of committee meetings tonight. We are going to alter the agenda slightly, and we will be having the Finance and Personnel Committee first, as we have an out-of-town presenter who needs to do travel yet tonight. Those Finance Committee members, Sam Crowell is chair, Jeff Reisner, Ben Ziff, and Solveig Spjeldness are the members for the Finance Committee to stay up at the dais.
Thank you, President Isley. A few items on the agenda tonight. The first item, the new fire headquarters, and talking about the bond that will be necessary. As I think everyone is aware, our Public Safety Capital Improvements Levy passed by voters last week. And council will now need to, city administration and council together will need to start moving forward on the project for the new Athens Fire Department headquarters, including timeline for land acquisition as well as a bonding timeline. And tonight we will be discussing the bonding timeline. We are joined by Mike Burns. He is the Managing Director of Public Finance at R.W. Baird & Company, investment bank and financial services company. And an OU grad. Welcome back to Athens, Mike. Glad to have you here. And we'll hear from Mike tonight on the bond, and then council in the next couple of weeks will be needing legislation to move forward with this process. Mike, thanks very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to join you tonight, and it's always great to come back. I was saying to Kathy before, I actually came down a little early, an hour early. I thought I'd walk around campus, maybe get a bite to eat at the pub, my favorite restaurant. Everything's closed. So I'm going to Chipotle instead, which wasn't quite Athens. But it was still nice to see the campus. It's always great to come back. Again, thank you for having me tonight. My name is Mike Burns. I'm with Baird. And I've been fortunate enough to work with the city of Athens for several years now on different bond issues and different finances that the city has. I've also been fortunate enough to work with your school district, Athens City School District. I financed their new school facilities in the past couple of years, as well as most of the school districts throughout Athens and Meigs and Hocking County. So notice they're very well. I do have some handouts I'd like to hand out. I'm really here for you tonight. So if you have any questions, want to talk about anything, just kind of lead me in that direction. I'm happy to respond to you. Begin with, here's the interest rate graph. And you're going to see this often as I kind of, you see this interest rate graph on occasion over the next couple of months. And this is a good indication of where tax-exempt interest rates have been. And you can see on this is what we call the AAA M&D index. And you can see the 5, 10, and 20-year index. This is only the index that tax-exempt bonds are sold off of. And you can see going back to 2019, the 5, 10, and 20-year index was anywhere from 2% up to almost 3%. Came down over time, and in March 2020, we all know what that was. I see some masks still on. We know what happened then. That's when COVID really hit home. And what happened was fear. Fear caused interest rates to go sky high. And you can see interest rates went up quite a bit. As fear subsided, interest rates came back down and stayed really, really low for 2020 and 2021. Then 2022 came around. January 22 came around, and what happened was it's time for rates to go up. We've been all talking about rates have to go up, rates have to go up, inflation fears, all this stuff going on. The economy is doing pretty well, unemployment rates very low, and that caused interest rates to spike up. So although some would say it's good for the economy, it's bad for your bond issue. And if you remember, I met with the Finance Committee before, we chatted about there's a process when you issue bonds. You can't just walk into your local bank and say, hey, I need to issue a bond, let's do it tomorrow. You got to get the support of the bond of the taxpayers, which thankfully the taxpayers stepped up and supported the income tax levy very strongly. So now we got that hurdle passed. Now we got to talk about the financing side, the issuance of bonds. And this is a process as well. I'm going to work with your mayor, I'm going to work with your auditor, just like I did last time, and it's a process we got to go through. But the last time we met, we talked about timing, and we all understood interest rates are going up, so we all were in agreement that if we're fortunate enough to have this income tax pass, we need to get jumping as soon as we can. And that's essentially what I've done, and what you have done as city council. And we're in a position now where we're ready to move as quickly as we possibly can. So in my opinion, it's almost like a race against time. We want to get to the market as quickly as we can, and I think we have a good path going forward. If you look at this graph, you can see February 23rd is when we kind of locked in the interest rates for ballot purposes. And then you can see what the change was just since February 23rd. Interest rates went up anywhere from 1.1 to 1.12% over that time period, which is a pretty big jump when you look how low rates were originally. It's not quite double, but it's getting close. The last thing I'll say about interest rates, unless there's questions, is this is one other graph, the same exact graph, but you can see this goes way back to 1991. And I always like to hand this out just to kind of shed some light on, rates are going up. And it's a shame that we couldn't have got to the market a little sooner than we did. Again, we couldn't. You guys moved as quickly as you possibly could and did everything right. But if you look back to 1991, these same index, 5, 10, and 20-year index, was anywhere from 6 up to 7% index. And you can see ever since then it kind of came down. There's a couple of spikes up and down during the Great Recession, the 2000 recession. So overall, interest rates are still very, very low. And that's what I want to point out. Rates are still very, very low. They're not as low as they were back in January or December of last year, but overall they're still at a very low interest rate. So it's a good time to borrow. Now in terms of different projects, here's another sheet I'm going to hand out, and you can see on this, some of you have probably seen this before. And it shows this $7.5, $8.5, and $9 million projects. And you can kind of see over 20 years, which is the term that I think the city decided they want to go out and finance this fire station over a 20-year term. You can see the third column from the right is the estimated annual payment as of today. And you can see the fourth column over from the right is how much we're projecting the income tax to be, the 0.1% income tax. We're projecting will increase income tax revenues by, let's call it 900,000, 898,000. So you can see the payment come out, and then you can see the excess money after you make your payment on each one, which is still good coverage, and that's important too. So we want to make sure that when we issue your bonds, that your debt payment's low enough that we can make sure that your income tax revenues, the 0.1% income tax, is still going to come in well above that, and you can see that it does here. So I think even with the rate hikes, we're still in a very, very good position to move forward with this project, even on the largest project, which is $9 million. And again, I know you're still trying to figure out the project cost of this project. It's going to vary, over time here. But I like to show kind of worst case scenario in terms of $9 million that you can still afford that if that's what you decide to do going forward. So I'm going to stop real quick here and just kind of open up any questions by anyone about interest rates and where they've been. I didn't really mention where I think rates are going to go moving forward, but interest rates going forward are talking in June. They being the Federal Reserve Board is talking about increasing the Fed funds rate by another 50 basis points, which is another 0.5%. In June. They just raised the Fed funds rate in May last week by 0.5%. Again, they expect another 0.5% in June, and I'm hearing maybe another 0.25% to 0.5% at least this year, later on this year. So again, I think it's kind of a race against time to try to lock these rates in as soon as we can to keep the cost down as much as possible. But any questions about interest rates or the financing itself, the issuance of bonds? Okay. So the process of issuing bonds, we're going to do exactly the same thing we did last time with the pool bonds. The pool bonds were income tax that we raised, the city raised. We issued bonds, we got a bond rating, we did an official statement. Your mayor, your auditor did a really, really good job up in Chicago. They presented to the rating agency. They hit the ball out of the ballpark. You know, we came home with a really strong bond rating of AA2, which is high quality. Speaks volumes of this city and this community. We're going to do the same exact thing, but sorry guys, I don't think we'll be traveling to Chicago. In Chicago, they're actually still pretty much shut down. The rating analysts don't even come in the office. They're working remotely, so we'll have to do a conference call this time. But since we already have a rating in hand, a conference call will suffice. The last thing I'll hand out is just a quick little closing schedule that you can kind of see each step that we go through. And this might change a little bit, but you can see on here kind of different steps that I'll be working through with your mayor and your auditor, as well as your bond counsel. And, you know, I'll work with the city just like I did last time, kind of hold their hands. They don't do this every day, so I'll make sure we accomplish all the tasks the right way, the most efficient way, and make sure we get a strong outcome with the bond rating when the time comes. The key date on this is, for you, it's a couple of dates. May 16th, Monday, May 16th. I believe that's going to be your first reading of bond legislation. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the first date. Bond counsel already prepared the ordinance. I reviewed it already. I had a couple of little minor comments, nothing significant. And then on June 10th, June 20th, Monday, June 20th, you'll then officially pass the legislation to allow us to move forward with the bond issuance. And then really in my mind, the key date is June 28th. June 28th is the date where it says bond pricing, lock interest rates. That's when we're going to lock the interest rates on that date. So that means we have interest rate risk from today until June 28th, and there's really nothing we can do, so there's a process involved. But June 28th will be the date we lock everything in, and when the rates are locked in, they will not change for the life of the bonds for the 20-year term. So that's kind of the next couple of steps. I wanted to kind of keep it short today, but I did want to give you an update on interest rates, give you a little feedback where I think rates are going to go forward, see what the payments are today, and then the closing schedule. So again, I'm here to answer any questions that anyone may have. Yes, sir.
Since time is a critical factor here, would you recommend that we suspend any one of the readings to speed things up? We don't have to drag it out till June. We could read it in May and suspend on the first reading, if there is good cause to do so. And it was saying to me, if we are saving the taxpayer a couple percentage points on interest, that would qualify. At least that's my idea.
It's a very good idea, and I'm glad you brought that up. It's a very good idea. I don't think you need to necessarily, because the other steps are going to take time too, so it kind of falls in line. Mm-hmm. If you do suspend it, we might be able to shave off a week or two and lock it in that much more quickly, but it's really going to come down to how quickly can we make it through the process. Like I said at the beginning, it's not like walking to a bank and getting a mortgage loan. It's a little bit of a process. And I'm sure Kathy and the mayor want to go home sometime during the day. So,
can you explain the process to everybody? The kinds of things we'll be meeting and doing, and what we present to the bond agency. It's not just we make a phone call and say, hey, we're great. Give us a good grade.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. That's a good question as well. The process involved is the biggest time restraint. It's going to be something called a preliminary official statement. It's a pretty thick disclosure document. It's kind of like a prospectus when you buy stocks. It has everything about the city in there. That's a pretty heavy lift for your auditor mainly and her staff, even though the mayor is going to be helping through this process, and maybe some of you. But it's a pretty heavy lift, so we need some time, a couple of weeks for her to do that, because she has a full-time job as well. And then once that's complete, we got to finalize this, the rating presentation. And you can see I already have it done. Actually, I just reviewed it today, 5/9/22. It's in pretty good shape. But this is going to be a process as well, which I come down and speak to your mayor and your auditor, and we kind of go through this. And the first time I kind of tell them what the story is, kind of like the coach in a way. And then the second time I come down, they're going to present to me, and I'll kind of help fine tune the message a little bit. Then the third meeting would be, and this is all outlined in the closing schedule, the third meeting will be a phone call to the rating to see who's Moody's investor service. So that's the process. But the official statement, I know Dinsmore is working on it right now. They need probably about 2.5 weeks to prepare it. And then we'll probably want to give your team 2 weeks, give or take, to prepare it. But to your point, if you want to suspend the hearing, we might be able to shave off a week or two. But we're still going to be in mid-June timeframe. So it's really up to you guys on that. But the process is a lot of work. I'm here to hold their hand and help them through it, but it's not a simple process.
Yeah.
But they do a great job. Last time they did a great job on it, so I'm sure they'll do it again.
Well, the process, the process that you're going through is not just sequential, it's parallel. What council does is really independent of what the process that you're going through.
Correct.
We're passing legislation. The legislation's already prepared. All we have to do is meet, discuss, vote, and it's done. The end. Meanwhile, the process that you're doing continues on, sequential step after sequential step. So, in other words, we're not really dependent upon what you're doing.
No, it's just we're not going to save a ton of time by doing a special.
Yeah.
But it would help if the council is comfortable with just go ahead and get it taken care of. It won't hurt. If you say, hey, I feel more comfortable having the 2 readings, it's not going to move the needle too much.
So-
And you're exactly right. They're different things.
So 2 quick notes, excellent questions, Member Reisner. One is the city administration auditor, President Nisley, has been looking very closely at the calendar throughout this process since last year. And so that there's been some work that's been done well ahead of time to manage this in a timely manner. But also, I believe President Nisley is considering a special session on the 23rd, which would also move up this.
There could be, so there's a
Could
possibility for
possibly,
another special session.
For numerous reasons, have a special, which would move this up by a week, doing exactly what you're asking, without suspending,
Yeah.
but having a council meeting on that committee night, as well as the committees on the 23rd. Just wanted to throw that out there. Mr. Swank.
To Jeff's point, I think that sooner, much sooner is better than later. In less than 8 weeks, the rates have gone up 60%. In less than 8 weeks. That's huge. That's just unbelievable. We often reserve special sessions for very special things. We really reserve suspending the rules for extremely special things. But it seems to me that the quicker we can get this done, the better. I guess my question is this, and I appreciate the detail you've gone into with the situation of newspapers in America today. There is sometimes no newspaper coverage, but you're actually on the 7 o'clock news tonight, and this is being recorded for posterity.
Okay.
And the reason that's important is bonds are not something that most people understand. So this is an opportunity, people can watch this live tonight, other places come back and see exactly what we've done and what you've shared, and I truly appreciate that. Looking at this, do we have, and this may be for the mayor and Kathy, looking at this, have we locked in on amount? Are we looking at 7.5, 8, 8.5, 9? Which seems logical, because when you look at this chart, historically, I think the quote you says, money is cheap right now. And why not borrow when it's as cheap as it's going to be for a while?
Can I add to that?
Yes, ma'am.
So our service safety director's estimate is about 8.47 million. We were going to round that up to 8.5. However, the construction is not going to start right away. We all know that there are issues with the cost of construction materials. And so I talked to Mike about it, and we agreed that we would ask for 9 million. And just as an example, it doesn't mean we have to spend all that. And we specifically asked for our ordinance from Dennis to read up to 9 million, that's how much we will spend, but we won't go over that. And as far as the community center construction years ago when we did that, we didn't spend that full amount. And we ended our levy and our collections early for that, and we were able to do that. So if we don't need this, however, we do have plans for additional money from this levy, but we feel pretty comfortable with the 9 million as being the most we would need to spend for this new station.
Will local citizens be able to participate in this bond as purchasers?
Yes, yes, they can. And what my firm does is we go out and sell the bonds. And our goal is to get you the lowest cost of financing. What we can do, we've done in other cities, counties, school districts, is we can offer the bonds to the local community. So anyone local can buy the bonds through any financial advisor they work with. If it's Raymond James, Edward Jones, Merrill Lynch, you name it, whoever the local advisor is down here, if they have clients who want to buy these bonds, we welcome that all day, every day. In fact, what we do is we get a first priority, which means any local resident or bank or any other business entity that wants to buy these bonds, we'll give them first shot at the bonds before anyone else, as long as they're willing to buy the bonds at the interest rate that we can get, because our goal is to get the lowest interest rate for you. So yes, when we put newspaper articles out and stuff like that when the time comes.
Can you do that with the city school district here?
We did a little bit, yes.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I don't think we got a whole lot. Usually it sounds better. Keep in mind, people can invest in the stock market and make 12% on their money, or they can buy, whatever lower rated issue than a AA2 rated city and get a higher interest rate or higher yield. So a lot of times people don't really want this lower yield. But we offer it because sometimes there's people that do want to buy the bonds and be a part of this. Okay.
Other questions from committee? Other members of council? Mayor?
Mike, could you remind everybody, well, I'll remind everyone, when we went for the pool levy and we sat before Moody's, we were anticipating dropping from AA2 down to into less desirable bond rating. And what's anticipated this time around? Is our bond rating, is there any anticipation of it dropping or projected? Again, that was via Moody's, and Kathy and I must have done pretty well. We stayed at AA2.
You guys did an excellent job, and they appreciated them making the trip to Chicago. They appreciate sitting across. It's just like interviewing for a job. It's always good to be in person if you can, and you guys did a great job. You portrayed yourself well. And you're right, we did maintain a AA2 rating. I'm always the glass half full kind of guy. I'm just conservative by nature. So I would say there's always that risk of a potential downgrade. But I think you're in just as strong a position as you are today as you were 3 years ago, if not stronger. Your income tax is growing nicely. The economy is booming. I drive up and down Court Street and out that way, and it's all kind of economic growth. So you guys are doing a lot of great things in your city. So in my opinion, you're stronger today than you were when we did the Chicago trip a couple of years ago. So to answer your question, I'm not anticipating any downgrade, but I always want to make it clear there's always that risk because you're a very highly rated city, but you're not a very large city compared to like the Columbus and Cleveland, people like that. Okay.
When that final presentation is completed, I encourage all council members to take a look at it. It's really fascinating, the job that they do, the mayor and the auditor's office, in conjunction with Mike, to put together, this is the city of Athens, really from a financial perspective. And it's impressive, and it's a great document. Other questions for Mr. Burns? Comments? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Okay, moving on with finance and personnel, we have two appropriations to discuss tonight. One is $10,000 appropriation to the Athens Enhancement Fund. And this is in support of an August Arts and Music Festival that's been held for a few years on Union Street, on West Union. And the city administration is looking to support this festival with some city funds. On this note, I will just mention that this weekend is the Taste of Athens County Food Festival on West State Street. So a different block than we've often closed, and I think it's exciting to have things going on in different areas of the city. And 40th anniversary of Tony's and a lot of bands. The Come On's are playing on Saturday night. So similar, this is in support of the Arts and Music Festival on August 13th. Again on West Union. Are there any questions from the committee? Other members of council? Yes, Member Swank.
What is the Athens Enhancement Fund?
Mayor, would you like to explain the enhancement fund to Mr. Swank?
Sure. The Athens Enhancement Fund is a fund line where we receive monies that come into the city from the properties down at Depot. The depot itself, Mr. Bill Tremblay is the one who has an extremely long lease agreement with the properties that are down there, to include the apartments, but the city still owns the land in which those facilities are all located, and so it's revenue that comes in from the income tax abatement that went on with those properties. That abatement has stopped, but there's still revenue that does come into the local enhancement fund.
You want to share with how it's been,
it is not local taxpayer dollars that goes into that fund.
and share some of the ways that the enhancement fund's been used in the past?
Oh, we've used it in a multitude of ways. There's been some uptown improvements that we used the Athens Enhancement Fund for. We've used it for the flowers that you see on Court Street now, as well as plot flowers that we purchased for American Bloom, or not American Bloom, that too, but Project Plant puts those in. We've used it for purchasing trees, but it's dedicated for enhancing our community as a whole. And I feel that this is a very appropriate use of the Athens Enhancement Funds for the Athens Arts and Music Festival. As I look at the Arts and Music Fest, which really falls under AMAC, the Athens Municipal Arts Commission, that we continue to embrace that, and the city take ownership, through AMAC to continue to program and grow that out. And I think that we have an opportunity in that this event typically takes place on West Union between Court and Congress. So therefore it's in the Dora. And since it is inside the Dora, I think that there's an opportunity for us to use some of the revenue that's generated for the cups that are sold to all the bars that we, in the future, maybe use a hybrid of Athens Enhancement Funds, but also Dora funds, to have something like this that the citizens can enjoy. And I should mention the Athens Arts and Music Festival will be August 13th on West Union.
So just to expand on some of the comments that the mayor just made, the Dora obviously is also open this weekend on West State Street, and that's been a really nice way to kind of increase what people can do in these street closures. And for those like myself concerned about waste management issues, the city has moved to an aluminum cup, a recyclable, very recyclable cup, and then had an innovative way to mark all of these cups with the appropriate Dora sticker. I believe President Isley was in this room with maybe 20 to 30 local students who donated their time to sticker up a few thousand, if not 20,000 cups. And so we're appreciative of their efforts, and I think the cups are very nice, and will be another nice thing about the Dora. And the Dora did start last Thursday, so the Dora is active in the city of Athens, everyone should know. We talk a lot about Arts, Parks, and Recreation Department, and we've talked a lot about appropriating money towards recreation. And as has been discussed at this council, not a lot about the arts. So I think this is a chance to really support the arts of arts, parks, and recreation. Other questions from the committee? Other members of council? Mayor, anything additional?
Just that the aluminum cups is also honoring the plastic-free by 23 resolution that council passed last year, because we'll both, not only will the door be selling these aluminum cups, but any events on Court Street or city properties, they'll be required to not be using plastic, so no plastic cutlery or plates or cups or anything like that. They'll have to be plastic-free, recycled.
Thank you. So that ends that item, and our last item under appropriations is an $500 appropriated to the general fund for the law director's office for a needed computer. Any questions from the committee about this law director appropriation for a computer? Other members of council? Administration?
Seems kind of low.
Comments? We said the same thing, and we were assured they had, I think, additional funds that were added this time. We
Get
didn't
the
question.
Chromebook.
Right. Yeah. Other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, President Isley. That ends Finance and Personnel.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Crowell. We'll now move to Committee of the Whole. So we can have our other council members rejoin us. And we have one agenda item, a pay to stay. And this is a program to address evictions. And I believe Councilmember Ziff is directing the conversation and some of the discussion tonight on this. This is our first discussion of it. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, President Isley. Yes. So this is here in Committee of Whole. We only have the one agenda item. It is pay to stay, and what this program is essentially trying to create a safeguard for renters who may be facing an eviction. Currently, the state of Ohio is one of only 5 states in the United States, along with Louisiana, Missouri, and the Dakotas, where if you are 1 day late on your rent, you can be evicted. And that, speaking candidly, not very cool. It's pretty unfortunate. I know, and obviously, I do want to be clear up front that I am not saying, of course, that if someone pays their rent 1 day late, then every single landlord will instantly evict them. That's obviously not the case, but it does happen. And what this would do is this would allow a tenant the time until the eviction hearing in order to pay all of their late fees, the costs, the full amount of rent due, and if they're able to pay all of that and settle up fully by the date of the hearing, then they're good to go, and they're not able to be kicked out of their current place of residence. I know some people have said that, not saying people in this room, just generally people speaking on this topic will say that, oh, well, doesn't that provide an incentive for people to potentially not pay on time and pay late? And the answer is quite simply no, that's not the case. They would still be hit with all their late fees. They still have to pay everything. It's still a very costly, expense-heavy process to go through, but it does help those people say they had to replace the transmission in their car, and they just need that extra 2 weeks in order to come up with those extra funds to pay their rent. This would help provide that stopgap for them. It's overall, I would say it's a relatively straightforward thing. There are 12 other cities in the state of Ohio that have already done this, as well as Newburgh Heights, which is a statutory village like ourselves. City, we're a statutory city. We're not a village. 23,000 and some change, I believe. So yeah, it's not this isn't we're not setting precedent, if you will, with this. This is something that's already being done. I know there is currently in the city of Cincinnati, because they are one of the cities that has passed this, there is a judge that is currently refusing to uphold this, claiming that it is unconstitutional with the state of Ohio. He is currently the only one in the state of Ohio saying this, and there's been a large number of people that are actually very sort of confused by this. And sorry to sit here and rant at you, but I'm going to get all this information out there while I can. So there's a quote from Zach Fry, who's a staff attorney with Legal Aid, and he said, in referring to this being not upheld by this particular judge, he said, typically, this is a quote, typically when we're talking about a law being enforced or not, there's got to be a legal challenge to it or some case or controversy before the court that decides that issue. That didn't happen here. And then an additional quote in this same little branch of topic is from Deborah Levy, a senior attorney with the Advocates for Basic Legal Equality in Dayton, saying that this the idea that pay to stay could contradict state law is surprising to her, and essentially pay to stay just codifies an equity defense that already exists in Ohio law in landlord-tenant cases that basically says that if a tenant can make a landlord whole, then they should be able to stay at their property. So while there are some, tricky things to sort out and lots of little details, overall, at least in my opinion, I would say this is a fairly straightforward process as far as helping people, and I feel like that's sort of I'd like to think that's our job. It's good, equitable care for the citizenry of Athens. So
So we can open it up for questions or comments from council members. Councilmember Swank?
You used a word that I had planned to use in your last sentence there.
Aha.
Equitable, equitable, equitable. In reading through these quotes about support from across Ohio, something really jumped out that I had really not thought about, and it's the fourth quote, and I will quote. You think about what eviction does to kids. They move around, they don't have access to quality housing, so trying to get stabilization for families, particularly our black families, is really important, end quote.
Okay.
Who said it? Mr. Mayor? Our good friend from Dayton, Ohio, Nan Whaley.
Nan Whaley, yeah.
Kids, often forgotten, can't vote, don't have to pay taxes till they're 16, but they often don't have a voice. And to me, this is a policy, a process, whatever we want to call it, that would be one step in the right direction to protect kids. I talked with a smaller landlord today, and they said to me, ooh, there's got to be a lid on this, only so many times a year. And I said, why? He said, well, hey, geez, it's just going to get a habit of doing this again and again and again. And then they didn't say another word. And I said, boy, am I stupid. Not me, but them. They say, you know what? So they're late. We want people to pay on time, but they are going to pay. And from a business standpoint, if they pay late, they've paid. From a business standpoint, if they're evicted and my property sits empty, they haven't paid and I haven't gotten paid. And if I haven't gotten paid, the city doesn't get paid because that's not income that I have. And she said again, boy, am I dumb. 12 times. It's not going to happen, as you can see from the quotes here, but I think this landlord came to the realization that sometimes we worry about things that are just never going to happen. And repeat offenders, I think, is one of those things that we worry about that's not going to happen on a regular basis.
Other comments? Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to thank the United Athens County tenants for bringing this, putting this together. I'm also in support of this. My question, either for Member Ziff or anyone, is whether our state legislature has any, if we know, if they have any plans to dig their fingers and preempt municipalities from this legislation.
I actually don't know. I don't know. I would, not to be one to pass the buck, but I would turn to someone who has probably put more time into this than myself and the people with UACT. I don't know if y'all would happen to know anything about that.
I could briefly, yeah. And I may be wrong about this. We were on a conference call with some folks from Advocates for Basic Legal Equality and some other housing justice folks from across the state. And if I remember correctly, there actually is a Senate bill. I think it's a Senate bill that would enact pay to stay statewide, but there's probably not going to be any movement on it. Again, like I'm not 100% on that, so you definitely want to check on it. But I think, if I recall correctly, that's the case, that there, if anything, there's been a proposal to make it effective statewide, not a proposal to not make it effective. But unfortunately, because of the makeup of the General Assembly, we're not likely to see that pass, I think, anytime soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments from council members? Councilmember Spielness.
Okay, so, and again, thank you to UAC for this work on this. You did really work hard, I can see that. So I contacted one major landlord who read it over and said, fine with me, no problem. I talked to a couple of lawyers, and one of whom is a landlord, does not live in the city, but is a landlord. And she did have some problems with this. And the other lawyers seemed to be fine with it. And what she said was the concern about the loss to the landlord. And she said that it might be helpful, just throwing this out here, it might be helpful if the tenant would be required to send some kind of notification that they were going to be late and some idea of how they were going to do something about it, so that the landlord could be prepared for working with that person. The landlord who was the major landlord who agreed with this, was fine with this, said, well, you know, we work with our tenants and we try to help them come up with something if they're struggling. So they felt that this was perfectly appropriate. Let's see, what else did I call it? Oh, I think it's relevant to note that I went through the process with the clerk of courts, municipal clerk of courts, and discovered that the process is that the landlord has to send a letter or post it on the door, a 3-day notice if they don't pay. Then they have to, if nothing happens, then they have to send a file to get a hearing. If the landlord has an LLC, which most of them do, they have to also pay attorney's fees. So that's also another, unless they're attorneys themselves, which is another issue. And overall, it took, in 2022, an average of 20 days to get a hearing. In that time, there have been 17 filings that were specifically late rent related. There were other eviction notices that had other multiple lease issues. And I'm not going to worry about that because, of course, if that happens, they should be evicted. 7 were dismissed, 6 were granted, and there have been 2 set-outs. 2 set-outs means that somebody was essentially removed from their place with their belongings. So there's not a lot of incidents of this, and I think that needs to be taken into consideration as we try to figure out the best way of handling this. I'm supportive of this, despite some of the concerns from at least one person who I spoke with. But as Member Swank said, you know, is this going to, how is this going to affect, you know, real people? And as Ben said, how does this affect real people? So I have some concerns about what's going to happen. Oh, I know what I was going to ask for sure. Did the law director review this and approve it?
Yes, she did. Yeah, she and I have been conversing about it, and there were a couple of additional whereases that she wanted to have added just to give it a little more strength. But other than that, it seemed to pass muster for a law director last Sunday.
Okay, I wanted to be sure that that was the case. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Other comments or questions from council members? If not, I know we have somebody who would like to speak tonight. And if you could come up and give us your name and address, and the groups you represent, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi everyone, my name is Lori Bergshausen. I am recently a new tenant on the west side, so getting to experience a newer part of Athens where I haven't been at 79 North Schaefer. And tonight I am representing UACT, the United Athens County Tenants, presenting a letter that has also been signed on by Equality Ohio, Hawking Athens Perry Community Action Program, better known as HABCAT, My Sister's Place, the Ohio Poverty Law Center, the Southeastern Ohio chapter of the National Lawyers Guild, as well as the Survivor Advocacy Outreach Program. And I will just read the letter verbatim. It might be some information that you're already aware of or has already been stated, but I don't want to stray too far from it, as you know, it is a representation of those other organizations that are not present. Dear Athens City Council, Ohio is only one of 5 states that permits a landlord to file for an eviction immediately upon non-payment of rent. This leaves tenants and their families in a precarious position, particularly during a health crisis that has created substantial economic uncertainty. In Athens, almost 75% of evictions filed in 2021 were due to non-payment. Evictions have been shown to have a variety of negative effects, including being the leading cause of homelessness and impacting students' long-term educational success. The good news is that municipalities have the power to pass a pay-to-stay ordinance. Pay-to-stay ordinances prevent a landlord from evicting a tenant for being late on rent, as long as the tenant is able to pay in full by the date of the eviction hearing. This allows the tenant time to request assistance from local rental assistance programs, which are more available than ever as households attempt to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Landlords still have the ability to evict tenants for other reasons, such as property damage or unauthorized animals. Landlords also still have the ability to charge reasonable late fees when tenants fail to pay on time. Pay to stay thus ensures housing stability for families, while landlords receive the money necessary to operate without the loss of income through an eviction and re-rental process. At least 12 other Ohio municipalities have already passed pay-to-stay ordinances. Of these 12, 11 are charter cities, and 1, Newburgh Heights, is a statutory village. United Athens County Tenants, along with the undersigned organizations, implores the City Council to enact a similar ordinance as soon as possible. And just for reference again, that's Equality Ohio, Hocking Athens Perry Community Action Program, better known as HAVCAP, My Sister's Place, Ohio Poverty Law Center, Southeastern Ohio Chapter of the National Lawyers Guild, the Survivor Advocacy Outreach Program, and the United Athens County Tenants. And thank you so much for listening to this letter, and we appreciate you taking this comment.
Thank you. And if you could provide us with a copy of that, we could include
Yes.
that with our minutes then in support of this. Oh, there it is. Okay, thank you very much. Okay. And we have a question from Councilmember Spielness.
Yeah, and this brings up a point, and that is that there are some landlords in town who have extremely high late fee penalties. And I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to, and if it's legal, to cap them. Because, you know, if the landlords are gouging folks and making it really difficult for them, I would prefer that to stop.
I think that's a really good comment. I think it may be a separate issue from this, but we can inquire.
Yeah.
Councilmember Crowell.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that in the Toledo ordinance provided, they do exactly that. 1770.06, reasonable late fees. No landlord may charge a tenant late fees that are not reasonable late fees. To be reasonable late fee, the total amount of its late payment fee for any month may not exceed the larger of $25 or 5% of the monthly contract.
So that is a possibility. Okay, great. Councilmember Swank.
Picking up on that, in fact, on page 4 of the documents that they provided, it lists all the cities and the late fees. The vast majority, it's either $25 or 5% of the monthly rent, and that's all the cities on here. So it's obviously legal because it's being practiced in a lot of places
Right.
in the state of Ohio.
Right. And I just didn't know, yeah.
Yeah.
And we can find out if it can be incorporated as it has been in Toledo. That's a good
Yeah.
example. Yes, Councilmember Spielness.
Yeah, I just want to say it does say reasonable in the ordinance, but I think making it clearer would be a good idea if we can.
Defining reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds
Any other
reasonable.
comments or questions? Okay,
So,
thank you.
Just
Yeah.
to proceed, so the question was asked earlier, was this run by the law director? We know that it was. Customarily, we have committee tonight, and this would come up for first reading at our next meeting. Since you're leading the charge on this, is that something that you can get with Lisa on in terms of, and I'm looking to Ben.
I know you're looking to Ben, but we have a clerk of council and we have the law director, and the clerk of council is going to be away. So It's not going to be until the 23rd.
First meeting in June.
Oh, so it's not gonna be on 23rd?
It won't be on the 16th.
On the
Not on the
16th.
16th.
Okay, will we be able to do the bond thing on the 16th?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay. Okay, anyway.
Yeah, but thank you
We'll
for
look at
asking.
that.
It's
Wasn't
worth-
where you
it's
would be
worth
looking.
a try. It's many people making this all work.
Okay, that's
Thank you.
fine.
Okay, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thanks, y'all.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Well, I think that ends our discussion of committee of the whole for that item. And we'll now move on to City and Safety Services, and that's chaired by Councilmember McCary and joined by Councilmember Swank and Crowell.
Thank you, President Knisley. We have just 2 items on our City and Safety Services Committee agenda this evening, and the first, I believe, will be brief, just an update that the new fire headquarters is now ready to move into authorization for final design. I will just pause to ask if the mayor has anything to add to that, but I believe we're just moving forward with the project, and we'll be talking about that at our next meeting.
The only thing to add, and I meant to get a hold of Scott Thompson earlier today. There's a really interesting fly-through video that's been created that shows the inside of the new fire station, what it would look like, the community room that'll be used for training, but also community events. And so maybe by the next council meeting, we can have Scott tee that up and at least let the viewing audience see the inside of the building. But other than us just moving forward with final design, I don't have anything else to add to that.
Questions from committee members?
So I have what does this mean, final design? Is the thing already designed and we're going to look at it? Or does this authorize completing the design?
This will be for the detailed designs, the final design, because that hasn't been done yet.
Okay.
Yeah, that's always the last leg in the design where they get in, and this is, the designing of the ductwork, the designing of any, there's
here
the
we
video.
go. Okay,
The viewing audience is watching it as we speak. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you,
Thank you, Scott
yes.
Thompson.
And that's also a good ad for signing up for notifications from the city, because those kind of things are pushed out all the time, and that came out last week, so it's really interesting. Yeah.
Councilmember Swink.
So, Mr. Mayor, without getting in the weeds today, that was very impressive. If someone wanted to offer comment on the design, what would be the best way to do that?
I would suggest reaching out to Sully Albaja, the Director for Engineering and Public Works, because it'll be, I think code will, not code, EPW will have some say, also reaching out to the Fire Chief, Bob Reimer.
Okay.
You know, with comments. I do know that I have been approached by the Commission on Disabilities, and they were asking to have eyes on, at least have one commissioner who's looking at the design to make sure that we're hitting the ADA elements of this building correctly. But that would be my suggestion.
The reason I ask is, and Dr. Patterson, Mrs. Patterson may have mentioned this to you, when we designed the city school buildings, unfortunately, we did not design them in such a way that the gyms are accessible from the outside. To use the gyms now, we have to have school personnel on site to do that, and I'm just wondering that. So yes, I'll address that with Chief Reimer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other council members? Councilmember Spielnez.
Thank you. As you know, many people were objecting to the location because they said that it was a floodplain. And I think that it's important to assure the community that in fact that issue has been addressed and it won't be a problem. So if we could get a statement about that from whoever is best to say that, I think that would make a public statement about it. I think that would be important.
I can look on that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ziff.
Thank you, Member Carey. Just as, because, you know, people can see this and people are watching, just to plug a few questions before they get asked, because having been a paramedic in the past, I've spent a lot of time at a lot of firehouses, and I've heard a lot of the same complaints from people who don't necessarily just have a full understanding of how a fire station actually works. A lot of that, sometimes people complain, they'll say, oh, the kitchen is so big, why do they have all those different refrigerators? And it's because there are 3 unit days. There's unit 1, 2, and 3 for your different crews, and each one has their own fridge. So you need to have food storage for each individual shift so they're not sharing and getting everything mixed up. 2, there's a lot of times people say, oh, how come there's all these extra rooms between other rooms? And it's a problem that we currently have in our current station, unfortunately, where they are having to sleep directly off of where the trucks are stored. And you have to deal with exhaust fumes, so what you can see in the fly-through there's double doors, and you go through one, close it, go through the other to prevent any kind of carcinogen and stuff coming into the firefighters while they're at work. There's what looks like a big coat storage room in that, and that's for their turnout gear. That's all of the heavy gear they wear for fire suppression, and it gets covered in carcinogens, and it needs to have its own room for off-gassing because it's a huge health risk. Cancer is one of the single biggest killers of firefighters in the nation. And so anything we can do, steps like that, to prevent those kinds of health issues for them with them already having such a dangerous job is great. This is a great looking station, quite honestly. I've been in a lot of stations in Columbus, in Lancaster, and in Zanesville. This looks awesome. I mean, this, like, hats off to the design crew for this, because this is a genuinely gorgeous station. I know any number of people that I've worked with in the past, and myself included, would love to work in there. So thank you for putting in the time and effort to those folks who have done that.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, there was a lot of listening that took place with the open house that we had, where the public came in and got to make, you know, at least give their opinion about designs like the clock tower. You know, would it be nice to have this or not? And it certainly adds to kind of the nature of Athens to have, you know, the little features like that, which will make it nice. Plus, again, the community room is great because it's it's always good to have a community event space that's embedded in a neighborhood, which this one would be, sitting right on the border, on the edge of a neighborhood, the Near East neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 2 other things that have come up previously that might still raise questions as council members have started to preemptively answer. I'm curious about the concerns over neighborhood sound, the need for a sound barrier, and this also kind of ties into Councilmember Reisner's suggestion that we be conscientious from the beginning about opportunities for community art. So I am just putting that in the context of this design conversation as things go forward and we think about the input we've already received from community members, but also kind of those frequently asked questions like what is the policy for when the siren comes on, and are there any architectural factors that are intended to help with the noise concerns? But I think we'll have those opportunities to ask questions as things move forward, right? Councilmember Stillness.
Yeah, I do want to address the noise issue because Councilmember Swank and I had a tour and talked to Chief Reimer, and he said, well, we only turn the sirens on when there's traffic. It's not for, our entertainment here. So, because of where it comes out onto Stimson, and probably mostly in the evenings, there's not that much traffic there. So unless there's traffic, they're not going to turn it on because there's not really a need to.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, Member McCary. I'll just add another piece that I've heard, which is concern about people coming off of the highway at a high rate of speed and some interactions with the fire personnel coming out of the fire station. I don't believe that the entire community is aware that ODOT has a project to reconfigure the area to the east of the 33 overpass over Stimson Avenue to actually reconfigure that whole area and make it a roundabout. So there won't be that same kind of speed coming off of the highway onto Stimson Avenue, which I hope will alleviate some of these concerns that people have, understandably. Thank you, Member McCary.
Thank you. I believe that concludes that item, so we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is also quite brief. Disposal of a mower. We see this engineering and public works is the area that needs to get rid of a mower that's no longer needed for municipal use at this point, but I imagine that just means we'll be looking for an ordinance at our next meeting. Is that right? Okay, thank you. I will ask, are there any questions about the disposal of the mower from committee members?
Does it work?
Other council members? Administration? Public? Okay, and there will be plenty of opportunities for questions as we see that ordinance. Won't be that exciting though, I don't think. That concludes our City and Safety Services Committee meeting.
Thank you, Councilmember McCary. We'll close tonight with our Transportation Committee. That's chaired by Councilmember Reisner and joined by Councilmembers Ziff and Swank.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a email from the Assistant City Engineer Jessica Dine about the Small Cities Program funding application. I could just say, let me just read part of the email here. After reviewing the Athens 2040 Comprehensive Plan, a project on Columbus Road appears to be a good fit for the application. The addition of Marietta Memorial Hospital is expected to spur some further development along the corridor, and this is a good opportunity to obtain outside funding for selected improvements, which sounds like a great idea to me. Does the mayor like to add a little bit to that?
Absolutely. The Columbus Road itself has a really wide right-of-way. And so it gives us the opportunity under this grant to include sidewalks, possibly bike lane or mixed use bike path of some type through that area. Director Olivaja has already contacted several of the property owners down there, and for a change, the property owners actually said, yes, please give me a curb, because traffic is using, next time you're driving down Columbus Road, make notice of the fact that you can't tell the difference between a curb cut and a parking area in front of a lot of those businesses. So people are literally doing U-turns in people's parking lots and then going back the other direction on Columbus Road. So you know, it's always a good sign when you've got property owners actually saying, yes, please, thank you, to have some development down there. And as you indicated, you know, with Marietta Memorial building a freestanding hospital that'll have 160 great paying jobs in that facility, you know, that's gonna, you know, really beckon for alternative modes of commuting through that area. And we have the Columbus Road Bike Path Spur, so we have the ability to create more active transportation and using that Columbus Road Bike Path Spur, you know, especially with the 40 or the 100 and potentially 190 affordable rental units that are going to be going in over at 682 and 56. It also will lend itself with equity of being able to commute back and forth for someone who lives there and maybe working on Columbus Road or at the new hospital. You don't know, but we think that this is a good project. Director Alabaja really thinks this is a good project. I do too. It's the last gateway into the city that we really haven't put the needed attention to, and so this gives us that opportunity to redo, again, our final major gateway into the city of Athens, because you only get one first impression.
Well, it says here that the grant application is due June the 15th, so legislation's prepared and ready for next week. We could start moving on it.
I believe so, or it will be shortly.
Yep, we can.
Okay. Questions from committee? Member Swank?
Did you mention a possible amount?
No, I didn't.
I don't know. I will find out for you. I'm sure it will be
It's a grant.
lot. I'll find out for you.
Yeah, I know, $7. 25,000 or $1 million.
Oh, it's going to be in the millions.
Okay. So moved.
Yeah, just name a figure. Member Ziff, anything?
No.
No. Thank you. Other committee members, council members? No. Administration, audience?
Just a quick comment. This is, again, this is only a grant that a city that is less than 25,000 in population can apply for. So if there's any silver lining to us not exceeding 25,000 with, I believe, an undercounted city due to the pandemic and a large swath of our community not here, you know, so we're still eligible for small cities.
And it does set a $2 billion cap. Doesn't mean that that's the average size of the grants or not. No, no. Million.
A lot of curbs.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, if that's all, then that concludes Transportation Committee.
Then that concludes our meeting for the night. We're adjourned at 8:08 p.m. We'll be back in regular session